Thanks for tuning in to another installment of Advanced TV Herstory, a podcast that studies, analyzes, and celebrates women's roles throughout the history of television. Among thousands of comedies and dramas that have aired, strong women characters are still in short supply and hold valuable lessons for all of us. In some cases, good shows or characters of today can be traced to an influence that aired 20, 30, even 40 years ago. With an eye to aligning the leadership lesson, time capsule observation, or some fascinating backstory of a show's success or failure, my goal of Advanced TV Herstory is to connect the treasures of the past to the great potential of today's TV and online productions. Theme songs that prompt a smile, characters that make you want to stand a little taller, shows that defy social norms or expectations of how good women should behave. It's all here in Advanced TV Herstory. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. To fully grasp the role of women in TV shows, both in front of the camera and behind it, let's refresh our memories of what else was going on in recent American history. Remember, TV is the medium that today, more than ever, can turn in an instant, or almost an instant. So in researching how old shows connect to recent ones, or how a hardworking writer on a mostly male production went on to breathe life and art into shows that feature an appeal to women, I am reminded that the entertainment industry was merely one flipper in the pinball machine we think of as America, particularly during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That's never more evident or painful than when you're surfing for a TV show and come across something from the 60s or 70s that pretty much kept the women characters in their places, if there even were women characters. And if today you're looking at the major network broadcast schedule, that same pain that causes you to wince might creep back, because for every award-winning show like Homeland of today, we have Two Broke Girls or The McCarthys. There is so much talent in entertainment today, and by no question, women have more power than ever to finance and produce excellent, high-quality material. So I'm going to question the old cigarette commercial tagline, or a riff on it. Have we come a long way, baby? Advanced TV Herstory, this podcast, proudly answers yes and no. Thus, listeners will encounter segments that are truly celebratory. And then there will be teachable moments when we dig in and do a post-mortem. Hey, maybe we can ask crackerjack fictional medical examiners, Doctors Maura Isles, Megan Hunt, or Melinda Warner for some assistance. As women over 40, they role model scientific competence and ethics that our girls of today need to see. Our first big memory of a woman having influence over TV is the inimitable presence of that redhead, Lucille Ball, who had risen from being a B-grade actress to the pioneer of the small screen. I Love Lucy, which was produced by Desilu Productions, reigned throughout the 50s and charted too many firsts to count. But as Lucy and Ethel were yucking it up on screen, the girls of the baby boom, who were born starting in the year 1946, started making their presence felt. America's post-war economy was strong as technology and pent-up demand for goods, which came from the sacrifice of World War II, changed the American household. What else was changing the American household? From 1957 to 1960, the pill was being tested and approved by the FDA. Mattel's Barbie appeared on toy shelves in 1961 and forever changed how girls thought about dolls. Carole King, writing songs as an 18-year-old married mother of one, delivered us Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? And that was in 1960. So think about it. Connect the dots of the whole role that birth control was playing in the modern relationship, and you can feel the force of the women's movement on the march. And it was all unfolding on TV as well. And in 1963, Betty Friedan had published The Feminine Mystique, and 2 years later, the U.S. Supreme Court decided Griswold versus Connecticut, which struck down old laws that prevented contraception use by married couples. Where does Lucille Ball fit into this? Throughout the 50s and into the 60s, the company she formed with husband Desi Arnaz, Desilu Productions, was producing television shows and investing in technology and developing business models. Think about something as simple as commercials targeted to the audience. This was the level of business acumen Lucy and Desi were bringing to the industry, and thus they were among the first to monetize TV as entertainment, including syndication rights and that sort of thing. Desilu brought us Star Trek and The Untouchables, those classics, but also Our Miss Brooks, the title role of which was played by that wonderfully droll Eve Arden. The Lucy Desi Comedy Hour was also one of their productions from the mid-60s, and that really set the stage for variety shows that came along in the late 60s and into the 70s, everything from Carol Burnett to the Sonny and Cher show. Then there was the Ann Sothern Show, a sitcom in which actress Ann Sothern, a very tested woman, plays the super competent assistant to a bumbling manager of a swanky hotel. And then there was the Dick Van Dyke Show, which brought us Mary Tyler Moore, another phenomenal pioneer, and we'll cover her in another episode of Advanced TV Herstory. Then there's That Girl, starring Marlo Thomas, and Mannix. Mannix, which aired from 1967 to 1975, was novel in that Mr. Mannix's assistant was played by Gail Fisher, an African-American actress, and it was a serious, intelligent role. How novel. Okay, so Desilu was the second largest independent TV production company in the U.S. up until 1962, and remained the number one independent production company until Lucy sold it in 1967. So over the years and through their divorce, Lucy bought Desi out and led the company, ultimately selling it to Gulf and Western, and Gulf and Western then turned around and changed its name to Paramount Television. So when you think about closing logos you've seen at the end of TV shows, Paramount is one of them. Lucille Ball wielded clout in the form of production, distribution, and network decisions. But as it was getting into the late 60s, as bras were burning and women with college degrees were numbering just 10% of the workforce, and now we're well past 40% in the field, Lucille Ball was heading into her late 50s, and while she still wielded power, her involvement was definitely shifting. Which shows are the big milestones of change following the Lucille Ball days? One that readily comes to mind is Julia, starring Diane Carroll in 1968. Or maybe All in the Family and its frank conversations about social change, which started in 1971. We know that Norman Lear's critically acclaimed show, All in the Family, certainly had an impact on how women characters were depicted. Edith was far deeper and wiser than she often appeared. Sally Struthers, as Archie and Edith's daughter Gloria Stivic, opened some incredible wounds that Lear felt America needed to stare into and heal once and for all. And the Bunker's living room chairs introduced us to these women who would go on to star in their own Norman Lear All in the Family spin-offs. Maude Findlay, who was played by Bea Arthur, Isabel Sanford as Louise Jefferson, and Esther Roll as Florida Evans. All were incredible, accomplished actresses before they found their places on TV. By the early 1970s, major headlines in the progression of women in American life were being made incredibly frequently, and because there were only 3 major TV stations, everyone paid attention. 1972 was the year President Richard Nixon sought re-election. Helen Reddy delivered us 3 minutes and 4 seconds of pure inspiration in her single, I Am Woman. Why? Because that's the year that the Equal Rights Amendment passed both houses of Congress and was sent to state legislatures for ratification. It was a tremendous point of momentum, and unfortunately it was all slowed down by conservative voices like that of Phyllis Schlafly. The date by which ratification was allowed was extended to 1982, giving it a full 10 years in order to accomplish securing all 50 states. However, in the end, only 38 states remained in and 12 stayed out, and it failed. But another landmark action came from the Nixon administration in 1972, and that was the passage of Title IX, which I maintain is a major dividing line in the experience and the development of baby boom women. It has to do with the provision of access to educational opportunities, like athletics, facilities that offer educational opportunities, and classes. And it reads as this: no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. This is landmark. So finally, girls were able to get serious about taking advanced science classes and math classes, or playing basketball or organizing a gymnastics team, without having to raise hell and be labeled a troublemaker. Without Title IX, the immense interest in women's tennis through the 70s and early 80s would never have happened. But what have we learned about our competitive spirit and how men see it, how they value it? Where do sports fit into the female TV experience? Given the coverage of women athletes today compared to their male counterparts, it doesn't feel like we've come a long way, baby. But without Title IX, would we have 3 women medical examiners, which many would argue is still far too few, on TV screens 40 years later? So you have to take your wins and victories when you can get them. Women were entering the workforce right out of college and pushing the glass ceiling wherever they could. Between contraception and the law of the land under Roe v. Wade, pregnancy was no longer a career death knell or risk of a relationship that maybe wasn't destined for marriage. Some of the early depictions on TV seemed so simple, so obvious, and these women seemed so painfully shallow. And it feels as though they were characters developed by men, written by men, and promoted by men. While that may be true, those roles, which otherwise look like they have no meaning or no significance, created industry relationships and ultimately new opportunities for those who contributed to them. These are the connections that I will bring forward in Advanced TV Herstory. This is more than pop culture. This is art. This is business, marketing, and politics. It's the fabric of the female experience in America. And we are the storytellers. We are the Herstorians. TV, whether it's a show you watched as a 10-year-old and it influenced you, or you saw it for the first time on a Netflix binge, is a profoundly powerful medium. And as we prepare a new generation of young women to fight for opportunities, rights, and justice, it's time we take this decades-rich body of work seriously and tell the story, and appreciate the hair, and celebrate the humor, and applaud the courage. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Thanks for listening.
I'm happy to announce that I have a brand new single that's just been released in Britain. And it's a song I'm very proud of because it was the first song I ever wrote that became a hit. It was my first #1. And the United Nations has declared 1975 to be International Women's Year. And they have chosen this song as their theme. I think you know the one I mean. I am woman, hear me roar, in numbers too big to ignore, and I know too much to go back and pretend, 'cause I've heard it